There you go.
Welcome back to the High Energy Judaism Podcast. I am Mendy Levertov.
And I am Gilad Bogner.
And we are fired up to see you. We are
We're
excited
fired up
to be sharing with you Yiddishkeit.
Yes, sir.
Basic Judaism, inspired and infused with Kabbalah and a lot of our own ideas.
Yes.
Turns out.
Yeah, you're lagging on for our ideas. And,
exactly.
and the important stuff, but also our ideas.
Tell me, do you like the 3 weeks?
The 3 weeks between... is this between Shiva Asar B'Tammuz and Tisha B'Av?
Yes.
I have to say, I am very observant about a few things. I don't think that this is one of those things.
This is not one of them.
And actually, as someone whose diet consists of like 90% meat, it might be a bit difficult.
It's interesting. So first of all, for background of what you're saying, what's the history? What are we marking? What's happening?
Shiva Asar B'Tammuz is a fast. I feel like I don't know what the background, or I'm blanking on the background. Tisha B'Av is the Yom HaChorban, the day both temples were destroyed. There were a couple of other bad things that happened on that day. Chet HaEgel also, Tisha B'Av? Or Chet HaMeraglim.
The spies.
The spies are on Tisha B'Av. So a lot of bad stuff happened, and we commemorate that, and it's a day that we agreed that you hate and I like. Shiva Asar B'Tammuz. What is it?
So what's interesting about the 2 days is that they're both bad negative energy days, to the point that we have bad events that happen throughout history that are attached to these days. And with that, we get specific events that we are commemorating in the reason why we fast. So the two main events that happened on Shiva Asar B'Tammuz and on Tisha B'Av are, on Shiva Asar B'Tammuz, the Babylonians broke into Jerusalem, and on the 9th of Av, they destroyed the temple. The Romans also break into Jerusalem on the Shiva Asar B'Tammuz and destroy the temple on the 9th of Av. Now, there is some things to note. There are some dates in which they broke in on they got into the temple. The Babylonians got into the temple on the 7th, and they burned it on the 9th. And the 9th, in the Romans, they lit it on fire in the evening of the 9th, and it burned into the 10th. So it's not like it's neatly like, oh, the sun went down, they're in. Rather, that's the day that it happened. Even I think that there's a conversation about the 17th of Tammuz when the Babylonians broke in, because the 9th of Tammuz they also broke in. Some archaeologists, I believe, have like a map where essentially they broke into one wall and not the other wall. There's other explanations. The Gemara gets into it. But essentially, in the macro picture, the 17th of Tammuz is a bad day, that bad things happen, including, by the way, the sin of the Chet HaEgel, the sin of the golden calf, happens on the 17th of Tammuz. Correct.
Okay.
So it's bad things are attracted to both of these days. Shiva Asar B'Tammuz, it's the first time from when God gave the command to the Jews in the desert that the daily sacrifice stops because they run out of animals. And they were even bribing the besiegers to give them goats to sacrifice in the temple twice a day. Eventually someone tells, I don't remember who tells who, but he's like, as long as the Jews are offering a sacrifice in the temple every single day, you're probably not going to be able to win this war. At which point, they stop giving them goats. At which point, they stop offering the sacrifices. At which point, it's a big trauma.
Okay.
So there's a lot of things that happen on Shiva Asar B'Tammuz, and the Tisha B'Av is the same thing. A lot of bad things happen. Both temples are destroyed. Which, if we're going by Jewish historical tragedies, the top tragedies are the destruction of the first and second temple. The Holocaust is a third. It is not as bad as the destruction of the first and second temple. Numbers-wise, percentage-wise, Josephus says that in the second temple, 1 million Jews were killed in Jerusalem.
Wow.
There's a lot of people. a lot of people to be killed over the course of a very short period of time with a very physical. Remember, they didn't have like gas chambers and machine guns. It was very
yeah. And to put in a few terms that may have been for those who aren't familiar, Tammuz in the modern 10th Hebrew month of the 11th. In the biblical calendar, it's -6, so it's 4 and 5 months, 4 and 5. Josephus or Yosef ben Matityahu is a Jewish historian who was by his Hebrew name Yosef ben Matityahu. His Roman name was Josephus Flavius. He is one of the reasons we know about the siege on Masada, about the details about the siege in Jerusalem by the Romans. And he was a very sneaky guy. Like he has a few. It's hilarious how like things always fit. But I literally heard a podcast that mentioned a lot of his work yesterday. He has a book that documents the war on the Romans. He has a book that documents his own life. A lot of critics come in and talk about the fact that that he's very kind to himself in his books, and he like plays up. He's like, and I think that even in the Gemara, he had claimed to be of Hashmonite descent, and there's like a zing. There's a zing in the Gemara that they're like he who claims to be a Hashmonite is definitely not a Hashmonite. They don't even use his name because they were not huge fans of his. Right. But yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting. This is the time of year also a lot of people are in Israel for summer vacation or for summertime, summer programs. I've spent the summer in Israel many years ago. And so you end up spending time, very nationalistic holidays, because they're holidays. I think Israel, I don't know if he's Israelis, that's a very big term, but I think the idea of Israel struggles with marking these holidays. Because
yes. Well, the Dati Leumi, or like the religious crowd, I think that this is maybe one of the most, and we've spoken about this on a different podcast, where especially Tisha B'Av, the Dati Leumi crowd, the national Orthodox community is very much the nationalistic Orthodox community is very much associated and looking for the hoping that the Mashiach is close, and therefore when they enlist the IDF and send their kids to become combat officers, they see that very much aligning with the future building of the third temple. So there are plenty of sites in Judea and Samaria and in Jerusalem where you'll see these gigantic readings of Eicha, and I think it's very touching. You'll be there one day.
It's a complicated concept, because if you're coming from the perspective of a nationalistic perspective just on its own, then you say these are days of national tragedy, that the country, we lost our national identity. Not unlike any other country in the world would say, we lost our national homeland. This is the big expulsion. Native Americans could have that day in America. They don't have it for some reason, but they could. This is the day that America threw us out of our homelands. Other countries and other traditions have this. I think the Polish people had it for a while. So that's like a real thing. It's like we lost our national identity. From a religious perspective, it's a big tragedy, which hasn't been resolved at all. In other words,
yes.
The fact that we are in Israel today and we are able to visit Temple Mount, we're able to visit all these places where these wars took place. It's the same way that throughout the course of history, there were times the Jews lived very large community. We always had a presence in Israel, but sometimes it was a large community, sometimes it was a small community. So we had large communities that were sitting and doing Eicha by the Temple Mount. You read these stories of the 1700s and the 1600s where Jews are sitting around, at the foot of the Western Wall, of the Kotel, and they're mourning over the destruction of the temple. For someone who looks, and this is why specifically the nationalistic religious community is so interesting, is if you look at Israel as being the replacement society or the replacement commonwealth for the second commonwealth, you're trying to mark a day of mourning, and in a certain sense, you're also saying we've resolved it. We've come back from it almost.
I don't think they see it that way. It is a very heartbreaking day, but it's I think that the nationalist Orthodox community, the Dati Leumi community, are very optimistic about, they feel it's close.
They don't.
I remember being brought up in school.
And feelings. Essentially, I guess my question is, do they feel that what they have now is already mostly the answer to that?
No. I don't think that it's a territorial thing for most of them. There are definitely chunks of them that it's like Eretz Yisrael Shlema, the complete Eretz Yisrael from Nahar Parat until. That being said, I think that a lot of them are waiting. For a lot of them, the answer is not a geographic answer, it's a spiritual answer. I also think that a lot of them are very aware, and we've spoken about this also on other podcasts, is that one of the beautiful things about Judaism, and especially about Judaism on Tisha B'Av, is when you ask any observer why the first temple was destroyed, he'll say, Sinat Chinam, free hate. And why was the second one destroyed? Free hate. And it's like, it's not because the Babylonians. It's not because of the Romans. Those are symptoms. Those were the final blow. But the reason is, and we look inwards and we say it was our doing, and these evil forces were the messengers of God to carry out, the final blow in each of those instances. And I think that in general in Israel, like, unfortunately, social media is a horrible place and it exists mostly on there. But I feel like a lot of Israelis, especially the modern Orthodox and nationalist Orthodox community, are heartbroken over the fact that Israel is so divided, maybe even more divided today than ever before in the history of the state of Israel, in the modern state of Israel. And I think that a lot of modern Orthodox Jews, and maybe all over, but I think especially modern Orthodox Jews are kind of like, this is not going to be fixed until this is fixed. We're not gonna have what we've been dreaming for 2,000 years until we resolve this issue. Because if we like in a vacuum, like in all honesty, take the Palestine conflict out of the equation, take the Hezbollah conflict out of the equation, we'd probably tear each other up even quicker, inside the Israeli community. Without a common threat, I think we'd start, I don't think it would look better.
It's a good question. It's a very good question. Especially in the last couple of years. There's a lot of selfishness, a lot of deep selfishness that the communities, and I don't know if it's a modern thing because I don't know if we've discussed this before directly, but people talk about how socialism only works inside of a family. Yeah. And
maybe a neighborhood. Maybe a neighborhood,
but it's usually a family. Where there's a word in Yiddish, which is a word in Hebrew, which is fargen.
Yeah.
Fargen, which is it's the same word, just lefargen, Hebraicized. And lefargen means that I can allow you to have something which doesn't benefit me, and it may even theoretically threaten me, but it's okay. Like I don't know. Let's say you buy some amazing guitar, and you show it off, and I'm like, good for you. And like, I know that you've been like excited about guitars, but you're also like, is my career where I want it to be? And it is, but it isn't. You've always, because we have like these like long conversations, and everyone has this thing where it's like, am I at this point yet? Am I not at this point? And then you say, you know what? I want to go and do X, Y, and Z, even though maybe beyond where society's expectation or my own expectation of myself is. I'm going to go stretch myself, whether it's chutzpah wise, whether it's taking credit for yourself wise, whether it's financially, whether it's whatever it could be. And to fargin is to say, okay, good for you. Yeah. Good for you. Enjoy yourself. Would I do that for myself? Maybe not. And if I did, I would also want people to say, good for you. In a family, that happens a lot. Outside of families, less so. Socialism is family is built on extreme communism, really. And as you get older, it turns into more like a socialism. But parents take care of their kids with no expectation of being repaid. Children contribute or take from the communal pot with no expectation of anything. And it works very, very well. Israel worked as a society, as a socialist society, when we were smaller and when we felt that we were all family.
Yes.
The more that the community develops and the more that the space develops, the more we start to look at other people in the community as others.
Yeah. I also think that
to tear apart, because then everyone becomes very selfish. And there have been communities within Israel's community that have been selfish from day one.
Yes,
Sadly.
and I also think that it's
not only talking about the secular community, by the way.
No. I also think I remember when we were in officers training, Bad Echad, BHD1 is the officers training base where you become from a sergeant into a lieutenant. And something that they pride themselves with is really, it really is a melting pot. You have people from all walks of life in Israel, religious, secular, rich, poor, all the different immigration communities from every corner of the country. And they often give you like debating topics about like an easy one that they throw at you is public transportation on Shabbat. And I had a kippah on my head at the time. And I was one of the few voices with a kippah on my head that was like, yeah. I think that there should be, allow it. And also it's like, and if there's a halachic issue with a religious person's tax dollars funding that, there are ways around that. You can know what your tax dollars are going for. It's not that difficult to get around that. But here's my take on like the whole division thing in Israel, and it's not on the whole thing because definitely I don't have the answers and I am not an expert. But I think that, and I use the analogy of the Pride Parade as a good analogy, is like the founders of the movement in California in the 1960s. Had they seen how far the movement has come, and how far society has come in accepting them and not granting them, but giving them what they deserve, which is what their rights are, chances are the people who founded the movement would kind of be like, oh, well, our work is done. And the same thing can be said, and obviously it's good that we have people today who are advocating for, the unconquered territory, the place where we still have to improve. But the same thing goes, like one of the biggest topics at the moment, especially in the left in Israel, is the not only the left, also the enlisting right, is like the Haredi community enlisting into the IDF. And it's like, how about we stop for a second and notice that we are drafting hundreds times, not tens times, hundreds times what we like soldiers in from the Haredi community into combat units, also in other units, but in combat units we are outdrafting ourselves by times hundreds than what we used to be in, like 15 years ago. And the same can be said about the religious community, where like they have these like about the judicial system, where I have no shame in saying I was very pro the reform. I hope that they go through with it. I don't know what it'll look like on the other side. And most people would agree that a reform was needed. That being said, a lot of reforms have been made over the past 30 years, and we can also be like, we don't have to be like, oh, all is lost. I was just speaking to a friend. It's like, if Bibi is replaced, the country will be such a better place. And like, actually, chances are, if that's your hashkafat olam, if that's the way you're going to see the world, where if one thing changes, everything will be better, you're never going to be happy. How about, like, there is so much more than a half full glass at the moment. Drink some water, Like, there's so much more to be appreciative about. Yeah. And the issue is like, most things, like, most people agree. Like, we really do. Even me and the average Palestinian who don't see eye to eye on who deserves what, we agree on, like, we want to go home and be with our family and our friends. And, like, so especially in a country where on the idea that the Jews have a right to a homeland, like, we can agree to agree on so much more than we can agree to disagree. why are we tearing each other apart?
Right. I think when I hear you speak about all these questions, it leads to a very interesting conversation, which is, how do you balance? And I was learning about this in Rambam, in Maimonides, recently. How do you balance what's right and then what a society can withstand? How do you balance that? How do you work with that? Right? How much do you have to be responsible for somebody else's life and their choices? Theoretically, the maximalist argument is that the Torah is 100% true, and it's responsible. Every Jew is responsible to fulfill it to the maximal, which means everything in the Torah, 613 mitzvot, commandments, positive and negative, which would lead to and society as a whole is required to lock down on that as tight as possible, which is the opposite of 90% of what you said a minute ago. Right?
So like society is like in a, so you're saying society is obligated to crack down.
That's the question. Right. So the society has to crack down 100% on 100% of the things, whether it's a halacha, whether it's a deraisa from the Torah, the biblically written, whether it's rabbinically written, whether it's a tradition. Society has to make sure that we don't let anyone do anything that goes out of line. That is one extreme. The other extreme is a live and let live experience, in which everyone has rights and choices to make on their own, especially considering that we don't live in a theocracy yet, or not yet, depending on how you understand it, right? But we don't live in a theocracy. And the example that I have from that, I was actually thinking about this a lot when I was learning the laws of, so there's laws of Ma'aser, which is the laws of, well, it's really more the laws of Truma, which is there are laws of tithe in the Jewish agricultural laws, the mitzvot. Generally speaking, there are two sets of tithes that we take. There's one that goes to the priest, the Kohen, and one that goes to the Levi, the Levite tribe. The main difference, besides for the percentages, how much a percentage of the actual crop goes to each one, the primary difference is that if you do a tithe, the tithe that goes to the Kohen is a tithe that becomes holy.
Mm.
Or in other words, the food that the grain, the fruits, whatever it is that you separate out, become holy. Only a Kohen is allowed to eat it, a Kohen or his family, or a Kohenet. They're only allowed to eat it when they're pure, they're not allowed to eat it when they're impure. It becomes subject to a lot of ritual laws.
Mm.
Maaser, which is the regular tithe, is just 10%, and it goes to the Levi, and the Levi can do whatever he wants with it. And it doesn't become holy at all.
Mm.
And there's a conversation about Truma, which is the Kohen separation thing, that if you know something has not been tithed correctly, are you allowed to feed it to people who show up? And then there's a conversation. So that generally speaking is no, you're not allowed to food. Same way you can't feed non-kosher food to somebody, you're also not allowed to feed food that wasn't mitukan, wasn't fixed yet. Okay, good.
Mm.
But then you have food, which is dmai. Dmai is you're not sure if it was fixed, and there was a community of people within Israel that were essentially the elite, meaning they were more spiritually inclined, and they were the people who did a lot of different things. One of the things was they never allowed even this questionable grain. They would make sure to give the truma from it, even if it may have already had its truma taken off. They do it again just in case.
Mm.
They want to make sure that it's holy. Are you allowed to feed demai to somebody who isn't as careful with demai, and you say it's your problem, you figure it out if you actually care about it or not? And that is there's a list of laws. It echoes. Now it's rabbinic. It's completely rabbinic. In other words, this question of was this grain, was the truma taken off this grain or not, is a question. It's not a fact that you know it's not kosher, or you know that it's forbidden. It's a questionable thing. The sages said, the rabbis said, that you should be extra careful and make sure to take off the truma anyways. And if you don't, it's called dumai, it's called meduma, it's called mixed. And therefore, again, it's a rabbinic thing, it's not a biblical thing. So you're not feeding treif to somebody, you're not feeding non-kosher food to somebody. What you're doing is you're giving them something which is not rabbinically kosher.
Okay.
Now that it opens a conversation, how much do you have to worry about the other person's personal life or not? Now, the reason why this question is so interesting is because the maximalist answer would be
Can't do
every
it.
single thing, you can't do anything, right? Now, just because we find parallels of this to modern times, where we say, you know, do you have to make sure every single thing you feed people is kosher? The answer is yes, in my opinion. I think that's how it should be. Does it have to be to the standard that you eat? That's a question, right? There's in Jewish law, there are certain things that are considered halacha, that this is kosher, and then there's things that are tradition.
Yeah.
Right? In other words, we would call it a chumrah in Jewish language, which means you're extra careful. There are things that people are careful to eat or drink, that chalav Yisrael, pas Yisrael, other types of things. There and certain hechshers that the certification authority is more strict or less strict. There are things that I'll eat but can you serve that to people? So there's a question: are you serving it in your house? Are you serving it out of your house? Do you have to let people know? Like one of the things about meduma, for example, is that if you tell people this is meduma, they can decide what to do with it. And if they want to fix it, they can fix it. And if they're ignorant and they don't know how to fix it, then that's their problem, not my problem.
Yeah.
But it gets hairy because there's like, what if you buy something for somebody else and you have to fix it before you give it to them? What if you're just a pass through? What if you're just, because it could be 10%. So let's say you're a wholesaler and you're buying and selling fruit. If you have to fix everything, you're losing 10% on everything. And maybe you have to. And if you have to, that's part of your business model. But if you don't have to, then you don't have to. So essentially, going back to the conversation about Israel and the whole society, the minimalist and the maximalist opinions are on very different ends of the spectrum. And the question is, are there things that are more strict and less strict in Jewish law that you can say, these things we have to, as a society, not allow, and these things we don't have to? An example of this would be the kosher standard of, I think the state of Israel requires that everything from the state be kosher, right? Is it the highest level of kosher standards? I don't think so.
It isn't.
Does it have to be?
So I think that there are two answers, because and I think that using an analogy outside of Judaism would be a good one. I've helped people get into shape. And people who know me know that I really enjoy being in shape, eating healthy. I do a lot of running. I do a lot of lifting. Recently, I've been doing a lot of stretching. And often when people are asking me, it's like, how do I get in shape? I want to look, I want to feel, I want to, like, each person and their intentions. And I give them what worked for me, which was 25 push-ups a day. That's not how I got in shape, but that's how I got in enough shape to then be doing, 25 push-ups times 3 sets plus, like a little, like core workout. And then it turned into running. And then it was that's how I was able to persevere. And I think that something, and this is a personal opinion, and you are more than welcome to disagree with me, which you might, but I think that the way to, in the bigger picture, the way to have people even interested in keeping Torah mitzvot, if that is a goal, then you need to allow them to work their way into it. And I think that I don't know if it's a conscious decision that you do, but I like watching a minyan at YJP every Shabbat, where 60% of the people drove there, I think is a great example of that. Where, like, I know that I've met rabbis that would have been like, you're not coming in here if you drove here. I know many of them. I was watching an interview.
This is the core question.
Yeah.
Which is what? There's an idea of the way that you are working in a secular society, and you're talking to people and you're trying to educate people. Education is different than society building. And drawing people towards their own Judaism with love and with connection may or may, and this is the question, may or may not be the same thing as being a society and building a society, allowing things to happen inside of a society that you have control over. right? It's a major question. An example of this, and this is, if you can get confused in it, I'll admit something publicly, which is when we first started doing the Chai House, using it as for rentals and stuff. I was of the opinion that I could do basically almost like a don't ask, don't tell type of policy, where someone comes and rents the space that isn't Jewish. They'll be allowed to use non-kosher catering and bring non-kosher food in. It doesn't contaminate the kitchen. They can just bring non-kosher food in, right? They're not Jewish. They're using it as a venue. What's wrong? In this argument, to your point, live and let live. Let people do what they want to do. And again, it's not like we're going against a Jewish law. It doesn't say anywhere in the Torah that you're not allowed to have non-kosher food in your house. It doesn't say anywhere in the Torah that a non-Jewish person is not allowed to eat non-kosher food. Of course they're allowed to eat non-kosher food. It's the non-Jews eat the non-kosher. It's a good thing. It's how it's supposed to be.
So
in their own way.
So I disagree with the live and let live, because I think that that's kind of like, I don't think that it's a live and let live. Because for the non-kosher food in the Chai House, I think that would be an issue, because what if someone kind of wanders in the kitchen and that's another thing.
That wasn't even the thing. I got eviscerated. I got gutted by a couple friends who told me, you're insane. This is a Jewish venue, a Jewish space. Kosher food is the only thing that's served in the space. Period, exclamation mark. It's a societal thing.
I see.
It's halachic, but it's not like, oh, what if it contaminates the kitchen? No. This is a space that is a Jewish space. It's Chabad house. It is a holy space. It is a Jewish run space. And therefore, the policy is you have, this is the level, and it exists with a lot of things in which you have to understand how to. I'm trying to think of another example of this. Because your example of the push-ups is a great example from the perspective of bringing people in and kiruv and helping people. The word kiruv is very, very icky. I don't like it because kiruv means to bring someone close. It implies that they were far beforehand. We don't believe in that. We believe that every Jew is intrinsically bound to God, intrinsically bound to the Yiddishkeit. In fact, one of the things that we're going to talk about in this, we spoke about last Torah portion, in this Torah portion, is the idea of Yiddishkeit being an inheritance, which means it belongs to you from the day you were born. The minute you open your eyes, it belongs to you fully, 1,000%. So this idea of kiruv, of bringing someone in, is a bad word, but the idea of it, essentially, the way we use it in colloquial terms, is the idea of letting people discover their Judaism in a organic and integrated, intuitive fashion, and allowing them to really come into it, because otherwise it's an externalized thing, not an internalized thing. They're not going to actually believe in it, actually do it. It's pointless. And if somebody chooses not to, that's on them, really. It's their life, not mine. Obviously I feel bad, and I believe that someone's life gets 10x in everything if they are super involved Jewishly. But that's one, again, that's all one side of the perspective. The other side of it is, how do you balance that with creating a society in a space? The Chai House has to have kosher food. Do I think that if I had an outdoor picnic area that wasn't owned by, was owned by Jewish people who own picnic areas around the entire city or around the entire country, do they have to have signs that say kosher food only? I think it's very different.
Yeah, it's something
right?
that's associated.
Or it's structural. An example of this that I'll give you is an example of, I heard about this also recently in a podcast, which is very interesting. It's the story of, there was a newspaper called the Allgemeiner Journal. It's a Yiddish newspaper, a Yiddish language newspaper that was created by a Chabad guy in New York, and essentially he worked for a different Jewish newspaper. He was a journalist, and they closed the journal one day. I think it was a daily, and they closed it one day. And one of the things that he had to figure out how to do it was not a Chabad run newspaper at all. It was a Chabad guy running a newspaper. And one of the things that the Rebbe actually helped him kind of understand is that this is not going to be a Chabad run newspaper, because Chabad has one set of goals and newspapers have a different set of goals, or journalism. And he would publish op-eds that were against Yiddishkeit, left-wing, anti-religious almost op-eds and articles and columns. And people were furious with him. How could you allow this to be? And he's like, that's the point. You don't like it. Write an article. You don't like it. put something into the newspaper.
Yeah.
Which
like
is fascinating, which is if it was a Chabad publication, he would never be able to do that. And the idea of understanding the layers of how society of having a newspaper that publishes or that is involved in journalism that isn't the same thing as being a religious newspaper. And the goal of it is different, and therefore you can publish things that if you were, I'm a religious Jew, how could I do this? There's nuance involved in everything. And the point is, I don't have the answer to how you're supposed to build a society of Israel in a way, like the fact that Israel officially keeps Shabbos, and the fact that officially the country, officially everything is kosher. I think it's critical. It's important. What makes it a Jewish country if we don't do the Jewish stuff?
I do agree that it does.
Translating that into can Eged run a bus on Shabbos, I hear arguments from a halachic perspective. I think the obvious answer is no. From a societal perspective, I don't know what the answer is, and I don't know what halacha would say and how you're supposed to do in a society. I don't claim to have the answer here. And I understand the maximalist argument, and I understand the minimalist argument on both ends of that spectrum. And the reason
but I don't think it's a minimalist argument. I don't think it's a minimalist argument. Because I think
minimalist on intervention.
Yeah, but I don't think that having a bus on Shabbat, and there are buses on Shabbat, they're just not Egged. But I do think that having a bus on Shabbat that is a taxpayer-funded bus, and again, there are ways around having certain people pay for that bus. It's not hard to do. I think that it's not. I think it's still a maximalist idea, just from taking a different route. And I also think that there's an issue in modern Orthodoxy. That's not modern Orthodox community. It's the modern take on what Orthodox Judaism is, where, what someone like. Take any community in Israel, secular, religious, ask them what makes someone religious, and they'll give you a few really niche answers. They keep Shabbat, they keep kosher, and probably just that. Like maybe like some people, yeah. So for you, or for someone from your community, it might be a mikvah. I don't think I would ask someone in Israel that, and that would be their answer. I think. I might be mistaken, but the reason I say that, and I remember when I was in the army and I had kind of started like not wearing a kippah a little bit. I'd taken off the kippah way earlier than that and kind of like zigzagged a little bit. And my dad, every Shabbat Chayei Sarah throws a big meal. It's the first Shabbat that he kept. He's a Baal Tshuva, and it till today is like something that he became religious. Yeah, he became religious, and every Shabbat he has a kid. Every year on that parsha he has a kiddush, and he asked me to make kiddush for everyone. And I said, I don't know. Like knowing the laws, I was like, I don't keep Shabbat ke'ilchata. And he said a couple things. He said, just to make sure, when was the last time you built a fire on Shabbat? And I said, it's been a minute. He says, the light switches, the car, it's another thing, but I'll tell you something more importantly. You are a huge practicer of Kibud Avayim. You wear the uniform of a defender of Am Yisrael, which Rav Tzvi Yehuda Kook, the son of Rav Kook, would compare to the Kohen Gadol. You've built homes in Israel. You've worked the land in Israel. It's good enough for me. And I think that was like a really cool moment of realizing it's like, well, yeah, there are certain things that are in the Ten Commandments. There are certain things that may be held to a higher standard, but it's like I think there can be a lot of religious ways. It's not like action ways. It's not like, oh, I'm nationally Jewish. I think there are a bunch of religious ways to express your Orthodox, like their Orthodox practices, that are often overlooked because they're not like the big three, mikvah, Shabbat, and kashrut. And I do keep kashrut, probably not as strict as you, but like I think that's another thing is like I think the Orthodox, and especially the ultra-Orthodox community in Israel specifically, and even the modern Orthodox community in Israel, are not practicing a lot of mitzvot that the secular community are practicing. I do believe that. And I think, and this is another...
I don't disagree. What do you give me an example?
I think the practice of tzedakah on a communal base is better practiced in the secular communities in Israel. I think, let me think about this. First of all, definitely, not definitely, but like working the land, a lot of the agriculture is secular agriculture in Israel. And I think that's such a huge mitzvah. It's like, it's literally a prophecy coming true. That like other nations will work the land and it'll go to dust, and we'll work the land and it will flourish. And like we see it coming true with people who, like no kippah on their head. I think that in terms of enlistment, even though the modern Orthodox community, which is a minority in Israel, the modern Orthodox community is very high on enlistment, you have more commanding officers for a reason from the secular community in Israel, and from like a lot of them from the left. There's like a big myth about like the enlistment rate in Tel Aviv, which is considered the most secular city. Nope. Still one of the highest enlisting cities in Israel. Still one of the highest ratios of officers to enlisted person in Israel. So there are incredible things that they're doing, and I think that they don't want to call them religious practices because we're not religious, but they're religious practices. They're the defenders of Am Yisrael. It's like, right. Yeah.
No, I don't disagree with you. I think what I'm thinking about. I think two things. Number one is, I think that there's 613 benchmarks, or 613 spectrums of how to be connected to God, and there's two conversations that are happening that are not the same. One is, what is the connection that a person has to God, and our answer to that is intrinsic, automatic, and should be acted upon. And there's 613 metrics by which a person can be connected to Hashem, and that the more that someone is connected to Hashem in any one of those things is good, and if any of those things that they're less connected or they're more distant, so to speak, and this is based on Judaism's interpretation of that, Yiddishkeit's interpretation of that, then it'll be detrimental for the person spiritually, or for the person psychologically, whatever it is, right? And that is very much a subjective, a connected, a spiritual, and this is the conversation, the curative conversation the column that I brought up earlier. And if you want to talk about this from a spiritual perspective of like, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Berditchev would talk about, there's a famous story where he sees a Jew standing in the courtyard of the shul, smearing foul-smelling oils and fat on the wheels of his wagon, which is like while he's in the middle of praying with his talis and tefillin on. And he says, oh, look at this, isn't it amazing? Even while this guy is smearing his wheels, the jagachts, this is a Russian word for fat, for oils, even while he's smearing the jagachts, he's connected and thinking about God, right? Does that mean that everyone should come out of shul and start smearing their wagons with jagachts? No, you idiot. Of course, everyone should be davening with focus in shul, in synagogue, praying and focused, and not being disturbed by their phones and by all the other things that could happen, right? There is a way of understanding the connection to God and looking at the powerful connection that a person has, even that's not related to this other column, which is, how do we set standards? How does society run? How do we objectively look at people from a perspective of, is this a person that I want to emulate? Is this a person that I want my children to emulate, right? There are people who are incredibly inspired and beautiful and very, very secular. Do I want my children to emulate them in very specific things? Yes, I do, absolutely. I want my children to be kind and caring and open, and open meaning they want to think about things in a very broad-minded way. And I want them to be 100% religious and connected to God and doing the mitzvahs the way that's supposed to be. So there's two columns, and we can't mix the two columns.
But your children, but you're actually justifying my point, and I think we agree. I'll bring it home because I think that we do agree. Your children have been doing push-ups since they were born. Religious push-ups. And therefore, when I see a friend in the gym who's been working out, I don't go to a gym, I work out at home. But if I'm at a gym and I see a friend of mine there, and he's not doing it with all of his kavana, I'm like, what are you doing? What's going on with you? Like, are you going through something? I'll inquire. I might even tease him a little bit with the hope that it'll get his head straight and that he'll be investing in himself in the way that I think that he should be and the way I think he knows he can be. That being said, if my friend who just started doing 25 push-ups every morning a week ago, and I see him in the gym, and he's not giving it his all, he's on his trajectory. And I'm not, and I'll be like, it's so good to see you here. That's probably the only thing. And therefore, therefore, when I think, and this is a criticism, and Rav Kook had a lot of the similar criticism, and from your conversations with me, it sounds like the Rebbe had a lot of similar criticisms, which actually probably helped shape Chabad into the incredible organization or organizations that it has become, where the person who hasn't been doing push-ups sometimes needs someone to be able to like come down and do push-ups with him and be like, it's fine, put your knees down for the first few, like. And that's what's been happening with the people. Like, I'll talk about myself for a second. Thanks to our once a week Kabbalah session, that we're completely selfish on my behalf. I want this and this to be changing in my life. I want more of this. I want less of that. Because of that, we got sent on a trajectory that started this incredible podcast, that put me on another trajectory that had me listening to Sefer Melachim, the Book of Kings, every time I get in the car instead of listening to music, which puts me on the trajectory to, like, when I get home, remember to put on tefillin and say a bracha before I drink the glass of water. And I imagine that trajectory will eventually land me in a place where, had you asked me before I started all of this, is there any chance that you will want to, forget could, that you will want to, and I think that's exactly the thing. If we start recognizing or helping even, people who, like, if you go to not an average kibbutz, but a lot of kibbutzim in Israel are very, like, proud of their secularism, which is, like, it's bizarre to me. Like, they refuse to call, Passover. They'll like have their own, like, kibbutz name for it. It's like, what are you doing? And I think that's the product of exactly enough bad interactions with the religious community.
Yes.
So I think it's not like, as long as you're not being like, yeah, do whatever you want to do, as long as there's an intent behind it of, like, we should be close, regardless of the Shabbat you do or don't keep, we should be close because we're both from the same tribe. And if you want, we're going to bring tonight, and you can hear about this incredible story of the Rebbe. And by the way, we're going to have a Shabbat dinner next week. Like, I think it goes so farther along. And
I'll agree with you, and to interrupt you just because I have to interrupt you, obviously. There's a piece here in which the Rebbe really threaded a needle in a very strong way. I think the simplest example of this, because again, the idea of bringing people close, the idea of having a society, very rarely do they come into conflict in a regular conventional sense. In this scenario, of a child in a school is a great example of a situation in which a child is a threat to the kids around, right? It ruins the societal picture. And the Rebbe's approach to that very much was, you cannot kick a child out, even if they're being extremely detrimental. You carve out a path within them, or if you're able to secure for them a place in another school that is much better attuned to that child's individual experience, and therefore you're going to move the student over to a different place, you're not kicking them out. You're not throwing them out to the dogs. You're moving them from essentially one arm of the collective society into another arm of the collective society. So then that's okay. But the idea of just, society, we have to keep society holy and pure, and therefore we're going to throw somebody out, didn't exist in a lexicon, which is essentially a microcosm of the macro question, which is, again, this big question of how do you balance society's demands and creating pure-ish space with the other side of it, which is bringing people in and people recognizing people's personal journeys and helping them in their own spiritual connection and making it all holy and great. So that's the two sides. How do we get into this whole thing? Because we were speaking about Israel being very split and very separate from each other.
Yeah.
And I agree. The biggest, that is an incredible challenge that the country is going through, and people have different answers. And obviously, this is one of the things which, it's a major struggle.
50-minute rant.
50 minutes on the topic. It's interesting because, well, in a certain sense, it feeds right into exactly the Torah portion, in a certain sense, now that I think of it.
Lovely.
Because, obviously, right? Because what is the Torah portion we're talking about? The Torah portion we're talking is called the Torah portion of Matot, which means tribes.
Matot?
It literally means a mateh literally means a staff.
Yes.
And Matot is the tribes. And the first section of Parashat Matot is a conversation about oaths and who is allowed, who makes an oath, how an oath works. And what's interesting, and this is kind of the theme of the entire Torah portion a little bit, is the idea that elevating the physical world, there's a part of it which the Torah says you're allowed to do and not allowed to do, right? The mitzvot tell you what is good and what is bad. And then where 90% of the work is done is in the in-between, the gray area. And inside the gray area where all the conversation, the confusion happens. I speak about this when people ask me about how hard is it to be religious and that kind of thing. The reality is not so hard once you set up your life for it. Right? If you're, to choose to eat kosher every day when your kitchen isn't kosher is very difficult. When your shopping lists aren't streamlined, it's difficult. When you don't have places you can eat out, it's difficult. But if you live either in an area where you have eateries, or you don't. You live in Austin, Texas, where there's nowhere to eat out really. The H-E-B kosher store is the only place you can go out to eat. So you don't go out to eat. You cook at home, like a lot of people usually do anyways. And your shopping lists are kosher, your kitchen is kosher, and you have meat and milk separate, and you have different utensils. How hard is it to keep kosher? You don't think about it. It's a thing you do. If your Shabbat is done in your house and in your synagogue, and your synagogue is walking distance from your house, and your friends are mostly Shabbos-keeping people, or people who respect the idea of Shabbos, and this is just the way that life runs, is keeping Shabbat complicated? And the answer is, not really. Yes, on a summer Shabbat, after you finished the lunch and you had your nap, and now you wake up and there's still 2.5 hours left to Shabbat, and you're bored and you want to pick up your phone, you can't, then you get to feel Shabbat a little stronger. But it's built into your system, and you're like, okay, I'll play, I don't know, play a board game if you're a board game person. I'll read a book if you're a book person. Go on a walk if you're a walk person. It's a system that you have in place. These things are not difficult. Difficulty really sits in all the in-between stuff, which is eating kosher food on a Tuesday morning and then making sure that you eat it for the right reason. And you go out into the world and you use the energy that you just got from eating the food in a holy way. Playing music in a kosher, it's a regular holy, it can be a holy thing. It could be a very non-holy thing. It can be elevated, it can be non-elevated. That world, the middle, the gray area is where everything interesting happens. And that the gray area is where the work happens. The world is not black and white. The black and white part of the world is the non-interesting part of the world. The infinite shades of gray is where the interesting stuff happens. It's when we just parse out first of all, there's discerning, figuring out what is good, what is bad, what are things that we do, that we don't want to do. There are times that you say, I'm comfortable with all this gray. It's very dark, but I don't care. I'm fine with it. And there are times that you say, no. This shade of gray is no longer a thing that I do. This is my limit of gray level. I like to have my air and my food very pure. I want to filter out all these particles. So there's this is what life really is. And it's in yourself, it's in your psychology, it's in the things you interact with, the people, this type of stuff you interact with. It's the infinite shades of gray that make it very interesting. And by the way, I think that art really sits in that space as well.
In the gray area?
Yeah, a lot of art sits in the gray area.
I think all of it. That's the whole point.
That's the beauty of it, exactly.
Yeah.
When you have a story that's boring, it's because it's a goody-goody story and a terrible, terrible story are both boring. It's the complexity that makes it interesting. It's the bittersweetness. A little bitter, a little sweet. A little bit of yearning, a little bit of resolution. Comedy, tragic comedy, it's all based on this blend. It's all a blend. And society, what we talked about earlier about society, this figuring out how you balance society with personal desires or personal kind of directions, is this gray balance. And the Torah portion of Matot starts off with a conversation of oaths, or people promising and swearing to do, but mainly not to do things. And it's an idea of taking something which is totally 100% kosher and permitted to you and saying that I choose not to have this for the next period of time, ever.
Is this... We've already discussed the Nazirite oath in the past.
Correct.
So what oaths are we talking about this time?
A person saying, I'm not going to eat bread for a week. A person saying, I'm never going to eat this in this person's food. A person saying, I'm never going to walk to this part of town. I'm never going to do business with said person. I'm not going to do business with said industry. I will never sell this stock. Bitcoin is mine forever. A person swears they're never going to sell Bitcoin because they have diamond hands. That kind of stuff.
Okay.
So the idea of oath can be random. It can be just random. A person saying, I promise X, Y, and Z. I swear to X, Y, and Z.
Mm-hmm.
The way that it's supposed to be used from a moralistic perspective, it's supposed to be something which helps you create boundaries for yourself that help you grow in your life.
Okay.
Now the Talmud, the Gemara also says that who do you think you are? Enough that Torah gave you a list of things that you shouldn't do. Don't add new things.
Mm.
It's enough. The Torah gave you enough. But, on the other hand, becoming more holy, one of the paths towards it is through oaths. Okay.
And is the parsha structured in a way where they're like really getting into like is it most of the portion?
No. Of course not. It's the beginning of it's just the first section, but that's the part we don't talk about because it's the very first part. What's interesting about it also is that there's a conversation about the releasing of the oaths, which is if it's an oath that is done by a woman that affects her relationship with her husband, or by a young girl under the age of 12 and a half, but over the age of oaths, then the father has the ability to release the oath, or the husband has the ability to release his wife's oath and to cancel it. Now, again, this is specifically about things that affect his life. He can't just randomly cancel her oath. She's a businesswoman, and she says, I swear I'm never going to do business with this and this person. Okay, he made an oath. Good for him. If she made an oath, I should say, good for her. She can do it, and he can't do anything. But if it's something which is specific, if she says, I'm never going to cook meat again, right, which means she's never going to get involved in cooking meat again. And he's like, what do you mean? I eat steak all the time, and you make dinner for the family, and now every single time that dinner's ever going to be, it's never going to be steak, or I'm going to have to do the cooking. That's just ridiculous inconvenience for the rest of our life. He can cancel that. But that you can only cancel within the day of the oath itself.
Okay. So why do we do Hatarat Nedarim before Yom Kippur?
Hatarat Nedarim is separate.
Okay.
And the truth is there's two types of things. It's a very good point. There's annulling a vow, and there is releasing of a vow. When we talk about here about the father, the husband, they are annulling the vow. They're saying the vow never really took place, which is why it has to happen immediately, and it has to happen if they hear about it and they can ruminate on it up until sunset. And if they don't say anything, then the vow sits. It binds. They have the ability to get in the way of not allowing the vow to bind onto their wife or daughter in this short period of time. What you're talking about, Hatarat Nedarim, which is annulling of a vow, that is going into the person's mindset of the vow and saying when you made the vow, because the whole point of a vow is that you say something and you mean it. And they're going into the mindset of the person who's making the vow and saying, did you understand all the I think we mentioned it last week. Did you understand all the repercussions of the vow that you made? And if you didn't understand all the repercussions, then it means you didn't do the vow fully. Your mind wasn't fully set on the vow properly, and therefore we're going to cancel the vow from this point forward. So it doesn't delete the vow retroactively. I don't think it deletes the vow retroactively. It could be I'm wrong about that, but I don't think it deletes it retroactively. It only starts now.
Okay, so we were talking about, actually it was, I think in our first or second episode, where we talked about Helena Amalka, who had vowed 3 separate times to become a Nazirite, even though the Beit Mikdash was destroyed and she was outside of Israel, and each time that it was released at the end. I also have a question, a funny question.
Yeah.
The amount of times I've heard a friend be like, I swear I'm never drinking alcohol again. Because he was like too drunk after a good night out or a good farbrengen. Which category does that fit into? Technically, he wasn't in his right mind.
Yeah, definitely not.
Yeah.
But also, in theory, a person should not have it on their tongue to swear things.
Yeah.
I always found it to be, in my opinion at least, I always found it to be incredibly, I don't know what the right word is. I always found that public school kids are swearing things all the time. When I was a kid.
Swearing things.
You know, we didn't do it in our family. We never did it. Kids in our school didn't do it. Friends of mine, cousins of mine, kids I went to camp with. Like the whole traditionalist, which is like a very broad picture community. Adults that I knew didn't do it. But when I met kids that were like real public school kids, it's hard like I don't know what the word exactly is, like super
public school. No, I get what you mean.
Public school kids. It's not even like all public school kids, because there's good public school kids. It's not like it's a very, very broad brush, but like a certain like style of like, oh, I swear. I found that there's an inverse relationship between someone saying I swear to something to the amount of truth they're saying.
Ooh, I do agree, now that you've put it that way. There's also a joke about like certain people in Israel, like the bad kids, I guess you would call it, in Israel, their nickname are like Arasim. They're like, and there's a joke that like if you want to imitate the way Aras speaks in Israel, you go Noder achi, Noder, meaning I swear.
Correct.
I swear.
Correct.
Yeah.
What does it even mean? Now, what a neder, interestingly, what a neder does is that a neder, a oath, what you're doing essentially is it's covenantal. And what you're saying is, I'm committing to this even beyond the external aspects of myself. So it can and it should be considered very, very powerful.
Yeah.
You're attempting to commit your core being beyond your interest levels, beyond your inspiration levels. Right? A marriage, when someone gets married under a chuppah, it's related to a neder. It isn't exactly the same thing, but it's very similar in the sense that a person is creating a bond, a covenantal bond, that goes deeper than good days and bad days, and deeper than, even I think, that's the idea of deeper than if everything goes well, and deeper than if everything is happy, and you're committing to work on something beyond the interest. That's why you make an oath. What's the point of making an oath if you don't? You're recognizing, essentially. In other words, to put it more cleanly and clearly, if we always are going to be friends, we don't need an oath to stay friends. And if we make the oath, we're essentially admitting that humans are finicky people, and it's possible that one day we are going to get into a situation that we look at each other and we say, do we still want to be friends? And the point of the oath is to say that we have committed beyond our own personal current enjoyment levels, that we're going to continue to be friends, even if things come up in between. We're committing on a deeper level, on a soul level. That's what a neder is supposed to be. But then there's positive and negative. So there's also the idea the other way around. You're saying this is something which I'm pushing away from me. Also, it could be that tomorrow I'm going to have a real deep desire. An example of the Nazir or anyone. The guy says, I'm not going to eat meat during for the next 2 weeks. I want to be more holy or something. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
So And then the next day they bump into a friend. The friend's grilling a fat steak on the thing. And they're like, oh, I love that idea.
The neder is there to remind you.
The neder is there to stop you.
Stop you.
Yeah.
Okay. Very cool. So if that's only the... Go ahead.
Which is interesting because this really becomes the theme for the rest of the Torah portion as well. This idea of trying to balance integration with materialistic things. And you could even argue that this is a big theme that we've been talking about ever since the spies conversation, which is this question of we're humans that are spiritual people, spiritual souls in a physical body that are working in a world where everything is gray, and our biggest challenge is figuring out how do we elevate things without getting sucked into it, and how do we use the experience both for ourselves and to make the world holy without being corrupted by it.
Mm-hmm.
So the theme of neder is a piece of this. In fact, the Torah portion Matot kind of feeds into this as well. A little different, but direct. There's what is the classical word for a tribe in Hebrew?
Shevet.
Shevet. A shevet and a mateh is the same thing. They're both sticks.
Okay.
What's the difference?
A shevet is a stick?
A shevet is a staff.
I didn't know that.
What does it say? What is the phrase? How did you translate? Spare the rod, spoil the child? Or even as we say, actually the better, shevet mi Yehuda. Yaakov's blessing to Yehuda, to Judah, is that the staff of kingship should never move away from his tribe. And he uses the term shevet. The rulership staff.
So in modern Hebrew, mateh is like it can be. I can see how it's associated with tribe because mateh is like a division. Like
right.
Ramatkal, the chief of staff, is Rosh HaMateh HaKlali, the head of the general of the general division, and then you have mateh, a mateh of an officer is his staff, and a mateh of a gdud is the gdud's directive staff. So yeah, I can see how that's a tribe.
In Hebrew, it's the same. Correct. So what's the difference between a shevet and a mateh? Not in the translation, but in the original, in the stick.
Mm.
A shevet is still attached to its roots, and therefore it's fresh and supple and soft. A mateh has been cut off, and a mateh has dried out. It has become hard. And this essentially is the metaphor of the soul coming down into the world. The soul coming down into the world, before it comes down, it's a shevet. After it comes down, it's a mateh. In a mateh, it's disconnected from its source, or at least not disconnected completely, but it's not connected the way the soul is when it is up there. But because it is not connected, that's why it is good in that it gets hardened, meaning it becomes stronger, it becomes more firm, it becomes more intense. The challenges of the physical world have elevated it. Challenge of the physical world have made it more firm, more connect, more I want to say connect, more strong, more
resilient.
More resilient.
Yeah.
And this ties into this again, the gray area where the goal of being put into this world, the goal of the Jews going into Israel, the usefulness of the oaths, it's all in the same theme, which is going into the world, taking the challenges, responding to the challenges, protecting yourself from the challenges, working on the world, but not being affected by the world. This is the conversation.
Okay, very nice.
And that flows into the next section of the Torah portion.
Yeah. What do we got?
So what do we have? So there's a few pieces here that are one after another. And they're as follows. Number one. Right now we head into a war. A war on Midian. This is in retribution for what they did to us. We're going to attack them. Fascinatingly enough, we don't attack Moab, we only attack Midian.
Mm-hmm. Well, the markets were Midianite markets.
Correct. Correct. But it was Moabite woman also.
Mm.
It was both. And the one who started it off was Balak, was Moabite. But one of the things we didn't mention earlier, I think Balak actually was a Midianite from home, if I'm not mistaken. He had been brought in by Moab to be their leader during this conflict. So we're going to attack Moab. The people who lead the war is not going to be Moshe. It's going to be Elazar, the high priest, and it's going to be Pinchas. They're leading a war. It's a war of retribution. They're going to take some loot, but it's going to be a lot of destruction. The entire war is 12,000. The entire fighting army is 12,000 people. 1,000 from each tribe.
Yeah.
Not 1,000.
Not a lot in comparison.
No,
it's very...
the 600,000. The 600,000 people that we always keep counting is 600,000 of the fighting men.
Yeah.
So theoretically, all 600,000 is the army. But God says, take 1,000 from each one, including the tribe of Levi,
mm-hmm.
which is fascinating. Because this is not a physicality thing. It is a retribution. They were going to reestablish dominance, but we're taking revenge on a spiritual and a moral failure.
Okay.
And we go. Who leads the army? Elazar the high priest and Pinchas. Pinchas is the one who really leads the army as the general.
Mm-hmm.
And he takes in his hands. I noticed this as I was reviewing the parsha. That there's an echo to when Balak sends to Bilam and he tries to get him to curse the Jews. He says that the people came to the officers of Moab come to Pinchas and they have magical things in their hands.
Pinchas.
They're carrying
to Bilam.
To Bilam. They come to Bilam with magical things in their hands. Ksamim biyadam. They have magic stuff. Pinchas goes into war with Klei HaKodesh, holy items, which we understand to be the forehead plate of the high priest,
mm-hmm.
and the ark, and the horns to sound during the prayer, during the war, in his hands. So it becomes this echo of...
It's very tit for tat.
In the hands. Yes, it's very interesting. It's an example of where you see an echo in the language of the Torah, where it's trying to tell you, go back and look at it.
Okay, cool.
When they go into war, and of course they win a resounding fight, and they kill every single male. This is a proper destruction. And then they also kill Cosbi, the woman who was the problem at the end of Parashat Balak. They kill her father, Sur. He's dead. And then they take all of the stuff, the women, the children, and all the animals, and they bring them back to the camp. And they take and they burn the entire country. They're not trying to settle the land. They're not meant to settle in Midian. It was not part of the promised land, which is an interesting concept that the Jewish people are saying, nope, we are here to destroy you, and we're not taking over your land. It is not a nationalistic conquest, which is interesting. And they go back to the Jewish camp.
Okay, and what do they do with all the spoils and women and children at the camp?
Very good. So there's two interesting things. What's the right order to do this? Okay, there's two interesting things. First of all, they kill all the boys, even the children, all the way down. They basically say we're destroying this country all the way down, which is drastic. They also kill all women that are old enough, that have hit basically, I don't know if it's hit puberty or hit old enough to have relations with men.
Okay.
The way they do this, they all the women, basically they say, Moshe says, why are you, how is it possible you save these women? Like, we know this woman is the woman who slept with that guy. And this woman is the one who caused this person to mess up. So he says, we're going to destroy all the women get killed, and all the women down to a fairly, I guess, a youngish age. And the way that they did this is they walked them in front of the Aron. Let me just make sure that it is either the Moshe, it is the Aron or the tits. I'm not really sure which one. Give me a second. Oh, the tits. Yeah, the breastplate.
Mm-hmm.
And they walked them in front of them. The faces of the women who were supposed to die turned green, and they killed them all.
Okay.
Okay. Pretty radical and pretty drastic.
And the young girls who were left to live
become slaves.
Okay.
In conventional old warfare type of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And then there's three things that happen now, which is fascinating. Number one is there's the laws of making things kosher.
Okay.
So one of the things that people don't realize about kosher is they think that in the same way that it says in the Torah, thou shalt not boil a kid in its mother's milk, and that means that you shouldn't eat or cook or enjoy milk and meat together, but it is a very mystical text. And it almost seems like this is a problem that I've heard from a lot of people. They're like, well, it doesn't even say that. It says boil a kid in its mother's milk, and how do we know it means this, and how do we know it means that? And granted, that it is very much dependent on the oral tradition. It's very much dependent on the learning of it, the studying of it, understanding how it makes sense and how it comes from there. Very good. They think that a lot of Jewish mitzvot are very similar in that it just says some sort of like a half a phrase in the Torah, and we're like, oh, guess what? This is 2 books of the Torah. Sometimes, but a lot of times it's not like that. For example, the laws of making dishes kosher. The idea that food is absorbed by a dish or by a cooking utensil, whether it's a frying pan or a grill or a pot or a pan. All of this whole idea is in the Torah. It says it explicitly. This is how you make things kosher. If it was in fire, you make it kosher with fire. If it was in water, you make it kosher in water. We obviously extrapolate, and the rabbis with the oral tradition, the oral Torah, have created categories to understand what is this and what is that and what is the thresholds and how do we when we say it should be re-kosher with water, what does it even mean? Well, we're talking about hot water, obviously, and it has to draw the flavor out. Things like that.
Okay.
So it's all explicitly stated, and Elazar says this to the Jewish people. And then in addition to that, he also says another law, which we know about from here, which is putting dishes into a mikveh. That every metal dish, and there's a conversation about whether or not glass is part of that and whether or not plastic is not, and glass and other things, but it's metal dishes have to be put into a mikveh to become purified before we use them for food. It's interesting is that if you cook something in a dish that was not put into the mikveh, the dish the food is not unkosher.
Sorry, say that again?
If someone buys a metal frying pan, doesn't put it in the mikveh, and then fries up an egg, you're technically allowed to eat the egg.
So why put it in the mikveh in the first place?
So it says in the Torah you put it in the mikveh because that makes it pure again, makes it holy again. And essentially what the idea is that there's 2 pieces to it. There's taking non-kosher food out of a dish, which is removing away the negative, and then there's bringing it into the positive. Sometimes you're preparing something by taking out the bad. We have to also make it ready for the good, or a vessel for the good. Putting it into the mikveh is that process.
I see.
And so the Jews learn about these 2 new things, and it's interesting because this is the first time that they're dealing with non-kosher pots and pans.
Because they brought it back from what they
up until this point they had what they had. I guess when God gave them the Torah, they had to deal with non-kosher pots and pans, but it was done differently.
Also, now they brought back loot from Midian.
Non-kosher stuff.
Okay, very cool.
Right.
Okay.
And then there's a fascinating. The next section is related to this war as well, which is a very. I wouldn't say the word is strange. It's strange because it's not. It's interesting. Where Moshe goes into a long. It's not a mitzvah that ever happened again, which is why it's so interesting. It's a piece of the Torah which basically is a one-off, where the Jewish people had to split all of the loot into two, and then they had to give off a tithe from each of the things that was split off, and the tithe for the fighting people and the tithe for the people who stayed in the camp was different.
How so?
1 in 500 for those who were fighters, 1 in 50 for those who were, 1 in 50 for those who stayed in the camp.
So a lot less for the fighters.
Yeah, by far.
For each individual or for the group?
For the group.
Okay, so it does make sense because there were far fewer of them.
There were far fewer, but they got a huge amount of loot.
Yeah, but most of it goes to the camp.
One half of the loot goes to the fighters, and the other half of the loot goes to everybody else. And then the amount of tithe that comes off of the loot of the fighters is 1 in 500. The amount of tithe that comes off the loot from the people is 1 in 50. So the amount of loot that actually ended up in the people's hands is less.
Much
per
less,
person basis. Significantly. Yeah. Both because it's thousands and thousands and thousands more people, and also because they lose more in the tithing.
Why is that the case?
So it's interesting. Why is it the case? It's understood that because the fighters worked harder, they risked their lives, and they did this thing. Therefore, they get a higher amount of reward. But there's the tithing is the typical style of tithing in that we want to take something which is physical and make it holy, right? And so you take one piece of it and make it holy. The 1 in 50, by the way, is not a radical number. That is the number. That is the suggested amount for the tithe that goes to the priest, the kohen.
Mm.
The kohen, the truma that we mentioned earlier in this conversation, which is the piece that goes to the priest.
2%.
There's no specific number. It is whatever you want it to be. The sages have suggested 1 in 40, 1 in 50, 1 in 60.
Okay.
So a little 2% or a little more or a little less is kind of the range, but it's not a specific number. You get to choose on your own how much that is.
Okay.
So it's a similar number to what we have here. What is very interesting is that the number of people, because it's slaves, it's sheep, it's donkeys, and it's cows. The number that there was, both of the spoils, of the loot, was enough and divisible by both 2, so it made 2 beautiful, even groups. And also, it was precisely divisible both by 50 and by 500.
Okay.
And not only that, but the assumption is it took probably a week or two. No one knows exactly how long it was, but it probably took a week or two for them to sit and split everything up. Maybe even just a week. Maybe just a couple days. And to think that in the amount of days that it took from them to gather the loot, split it into 2, then take the tithe of the 550, not one of them were born, and not one of them died. Which, if you think about it with a human perspective, like the people involved, obviously, it means very simple. But when it comes to the sheep, the total number was 675,000 sheep.
Whoa, okay.
That's a lot of sheep. The fact that now one of them died, now one of them were born in the course of this time, to allow for the tithe to be precise, and that every single item there's no fraction involved. It was round numbers.
Mm-hmm.
What are we saying here? What is the idea here? God wanted to show the people that cares. And he was impressed with the way that they did this war. And he wanted to bless them. And that they wanted to make it possible for them to fulfill the mitzvah in the most powerful way possible. Or in the most complete way possible. And it kind of shows the depth of God's intertwinedness with reality, with nature. Is it an explicit miracle that none of the animals died and none of them were born? No.
No.
Is it coincidental that the numbers happen to line up perfectly?
No. No.
Right, it's not. But it's not explicit. And that's, I think, one of the messages when we take this and read this, and you're like, what is going on? Like, it's fascinating, it's beautiful, and obviously it's strange, which is why it's so much fun to read it. Because like numbers, they're cutting it in half, and then 50 and 500, and it reads off. It says 675,000 sheep. So the number of the sheep that went to the people who went to battle was 337,500. And the tax, therefore, is 675. And then it goes to the list of the other things. And then it goes to and the number for the community is half and the same. It reads off the numbers and how much is the tax and how much is it, and etc. The idea of that kind of layers of telling the numbers and everything, the theme of it is to remind us of the depth of Hashem's deep intertwinedness with reality. Which is radical, because that's a message that we need to hear every day.
I think it's a good remind. Like, I feel like it helps see the beauty in the day-to-day now times, because splitting of the sea, we're probably never going to see a splitting of the sea. Maybe I'm wrong, but probably won't.
Mashiach comes.
When Mashiach comes. But you know that exact phone call that you get when you need it the most, like that comes at the exact time and gets the ball rolling on things. It's like, could it be a coincidence? Yes, but would it be valuable to not see it as one? Definitely.
100%.
I think that's a beautiful message.
And another way to say this is the piece of the Torah that seems so strange is actually the piece of the Torah that carries the message that we need to hear most.
Definitely. Like it may be a more
uplifting.
It's uplifting. And I think it's a way more profound message than only 12,000 people fought and burned down an entire country, and it's way more of a powerful message than that. It's more of these little things, and they're not little things. They can be huge things, but yeah, I like that. That's really pretty. What happens next?
Let's go.
What's go.
The next thing? So the officers come to Moshe and they say, it's very short. They say to Moshe, we are thankful that none of our men died. We have 12,000 men went into battle and 12,000 men came out. We're very appreciative of it. And so we want to give God a tzedakah. I want to give him a gift. And therefore we're going to take all the gold that we gathered in our loot, we're going to donate all of that to the Mishkan, to the temple. And we want to atone for the sins of the Jewish people with the Midianite women and what had happened, that major episode. We want to atone for it. And so we're going to bring all gold. It comes out to be 16,750 shekels worth, which shekel is a weight.
Yeah. And just for the comparison, King Solomon, who is considered to be one of the richest, one of the wealthiest times of the Jewish kingdom, was dealing in weight units of 620 mishkal. So we're talking a lot more right now.
A lot of gold.
Yeah, we're talking about for his entire kingdom. Like when he gets gold from Tarshish and from, I can't remember the other place, but he basically imports through deals. I think 2 or 3 times he imports around 620 and 640 shekel of gold. So we're talking about hundreds of times that in this case.
Yeah. Okay.
That's very interesting.
That's very interesting. Okay, so I mean, this is the goal of an entire country, essentially.
Yeah.
Entire country of Midian. Which I actually wonder what happened to the country of Midian afterwards. So if we destroyed it, did they get resettled by other people and they call themselves Midianites? Or
Because we see them again. We see the Midianites again throughout. Yeah.
Do we?
Yeah, I believe so.
Who? Where? I mean, I don't know. I'm asking.
I think in Sefer Shoftim we get patronized by them.
Maybe.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we do.
Moabite, I know for sure. Moabites, we bump into a bunch.
Yeah, all of them, but I do believe
Aram we talk to, we fight with. This is something which it's a simple googling and we'll solve the problem. So if you're watching this and you don't know, Google it, figure it out,
and put it in the comments.
Put it in the comments. Let us know.
Yeah.
Okay, so this brings us to the last piece of the portion,
Mm-hmm.
which comes back to this conversation of the gray area and the elevation of the material.
Mm-hmm.
I said this is going to be the theme that kind of keeps on rebinding the whole thing together, which is that Reuven and Gad, the two tribes, come to Moshe. And they tell Moshe, they say, we have a huge amount of livestock. We would like to settle on this side of the river.
Rabbi Gilad.
We're willing to give up on the others. No, this is Transjordan. This is Syria and North Jordan.
Rabbi Gilad. That's what they're called.
Is that called? Is that what it's called?
Yep.
Good. So they said we want to go into Eretz. I mean, the Eretz Gilad is how the Chumash calls it, which I guess Gilad. This is your area. And they say we want to take this land. We want to settle it.
Mm-hmm.
And Moshe has a conversation with them. He wants to understand if they're worried like the spies were worried. And it's very interesting to see him talk through this with them. It's almost like let's talk. What's going on? What's happening?
It's also, I feel like this is a different look on Moshe, meaning I think he understands that this is a different situation. He understands maybe that it's not, I'm somewhat familiar with the story, but like in a lot of times when people start acting out, either Moshe throws his hands up and looks to God and goes, these people, or he calls them out immediately. And here it sounds like he's like, pull up a seat. I want to hear more about this because I want to understand where you're coming from. So I feel like he is kind of suspicious that this is a different scenario. And can I spoil it?
Yeah, go ahead.
So eventually he basically, like you said, he asked them, is like, what are you don't want to come into the land of milk and honey with us? You scared of something? Are you scared? Are you not happy with the lot that you've been given? What's going on? And they say, no, we have a lot of livestock. They've grown accustomed to here. We've practically settled this area. And to prove our allegiance, we'll be the front line in Israel's battles inside the land of Israel. When we get called, we will be the first to enlist. And we will be the commando units. We'll be going first. And I think Big Mo was kind of fond of that answer.
Yeah. What's interesting is two things to the point. Number one, 2.5 things happen. 2 things happen. Number one, what did they want, or what did he want, and what was the conversation? And number two, well, it'll all be the same thing. They come to Moshe, and essentially they say, we know this is part of the land that God was promised to Abraham, but if you look at the map that we are looking at now as what we're going to conquer, this isn't part of the land that we were promised as part of the 7 nations that we're conquering. It's part of the expanded 10 land that God promised to Abraham. And there's a point earlier on in all the Jews in the desert where Hashem basically says, I promised you 10, but now you're only going to get 7. Mm-hmm. Because of the sins that the Jews did in the middle of the desert. And the Jewish and Reuven and God come to Moshe and they say, we want to take this land and we want to start the project of bringing Mashiach essentially a little early. We want to elevate this piece of land before it's time on our own initiative. Mm-hmm. Doing essentially what the spies of Moshe did when they captured the city of Yazer, and this general idea, which is we want to be involved in expediting the spiritual elevation of the world, and we want to be involved in a materialistic thing. We have a lot of sheep and a lot of cows, and we want to be deeply involved in raising them and elevating this entire piece of Moshe agrees. He agrees to, because he has this conversation with them. He's like, "What are you guys? Are you guys worried about the land?" They're like, "No, we love the land more than anybody else. In fact, that's why we want to extend the land out into this direction." And Moshe is good, and he says, "You know what? You guys want to establish dominion on this side of the land. Not only am I going to say yes to you, I am also going to add, on my own initiative, another half a tribe that's going to join you."
Chatzi Menashe.
Chatzi Menashe. Chatzi Menashe didn't ask for it. Chatzi Menashe was basically nominated by Moshe. And I'm going to emphasize to you that we already know, because it goes to the end of the Torah portion, who conquers what and how it happens and which cities each one conquers. The people of Menashe that are doing the conquering and the settling of the lands, we already know the name of one of them, Machir.
Okay.
Who is Machir? Machir ben Menashe.
I'm not familiar. Should I be?
Tzlafchad's father.
Ah, okay. So, wait, I thought Tzlafchad's father, his name was Tzlafchad.
No, Tzlafchad is, the girls are Tzlafchad.
I lost you.
Right? But not Tzlafchad.
No, Tzlafchad. So their father's name was...
What was his name?
Tzlafchad. Yeah. Oh, so right. Tzlafchad's father. Okay, Machir.
Where is it? Ben Chefer, Ben Gilad, Ben Machir. So it was their grandfather, I should say.
Mm-hmm.
Machir is their grandfather.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have Machir, who seems to either be alive or his clan was alive. His clan was alive.
Okay.
And they're the ones who go ahead and capture Gilad. They're the ones who capture another son of Menashe, Yair, and Novach is another son of Menashe. All of these clans, these are the children, they're the ones who go ahead and capture the land. They love the land of Israel. Right? Which is again to emphasize this idea that the daughters of Tzlafchad, when they were arguing that they want the land of Israel and they want to have an inheritance, it's the same people that later on are conquering parts of the land that aren't even in Israel. That they are being included in the inheritance. Like, I wonder, now that we're talking about it, I wonder if the daughters of Tzlafchad, when they got the inheritance, did they get inheritance on the inside of the Jordan or the outside of the Jordan?
That's interesting.
It would be ironic if their inheritance was on the outside of the Jordan. It would be very ironic.
Yeah, I feel like they wouldn't be thrilled. They'd be like, "What does this mean? What does this mean?
Like, we just fought for inheritance, now you're giving us garbage land." But the land was actually very good. It was very, very...
It was fruitful land. That's why they wanted their sheep to graze there. But
plains, the great plains.
But the other half of Menashe, I think, is prime real estate. I think it's on the beach. No, Alfei Menashe. Menashe is like north of the Shomron. So like Afula.
Cool.
Yeah. It's good real estate. Emek Israel.
But the idea of it is fascinating. Moshe himself initiates and calls them in and says, "Hey, I know you guys didn't plan for this, but would you be happy to take, you two clans of the 8 clans of Menashe, would you be interested in taking this?" And
very interesting.
Which is fascinating.
Yeah.
They say yes, and that becomes the thing that basically Moshe establishes, and we see this a little bit later as well, not in this book of the Torah, but later on. There's a few things that Moshe does where he basically begins the settling of the land of Israel while he's on the Transjordan side, the other side of the Jordan. Things that he wants to start the process of getting them conquered and ingrained in the physicality of the world, because Moshe, that's why he brought the Torah down from Mount Sinai. That we should have a land that we're making holy in a physical space, both in the metaphorical sense of like the world is the physical and we have to make it holy, and also in the practical. He wanted this city that I'm going to set up to be this, the city of refuge, which we'll talk about when we get there.
Mm-hmm.
I'm setting it up now, and even though it's not yet active, but I'm preparing it for when it will be active. And these two tribes want to take this piece of land; they're allowed to. And I'm also going to add my own fingerprint on the process. 2 more clans, another half a tribe gets added to this. This is Moshe being like getting involved in the whole thing.
Yeah, he was like, if I'm not going to be there while you settle the inside, I'm at least going to help you settle part of the outside. Amazing.
One more thing to it's interesting to look at is that in this conversation, again, this is an example of where every story of the Torah teaches us the law as well. Is that in this conversation of Moshe with the tribes of Reuven and Gad, this conversation is where we understand the laws of how to make a condition. If you want to make a binding condition, a conditional contract, or a binding conditional verbal contract, the laws for that, where you have to say it in the negative and in the positive, to say if it happens like this, then this is what's going to happen. If it doesn't happen, then it won't happen. And if this doesn't happen, the negative and the positive, the ways of framing it and binding it and creating this commitment to each other, not just like, if you bring me whatever, then I'll give it a great example. If you bring me a bunch of bananas from the store, because you're living out in the middle of nowhere now, if you bring me a bunch of bananas from the store, I'll play music for you for a half hour, right? I'll give you your own personal concert. So you could just say that, and is that really a binding commitment? Of course, obviously.
No, because it's not, because what if not? That's what makes it a binding contract. And it's,
if you do, then I'll do it. And if you don't, then I won't. And if the back and the forth, that comes from this law. Sorry, those laws come from this story, from this piece.
And how's it worded here?
It's quite long. Moshe says, if you will do this, then you're going to go. Then I will give you this piece of land. If you don't do it, then it won't be happy. Then you're not going to get this piece of land.
Okay.
But it's long. Do this. Take the properties. Build on them for your families. Build on them for your sheep. And then you're going to go. And if you don't go and don't do it, then this land doesn't belong to you. So this idea, the law of a Tanai, the laws of conditionals.
Okay.
And the only other thing that there is to point out before we wrap this parsha is that this war that the Jews did with the Midianites, God told Moshe, as he opens it up, he says, take revenge on the Midianites, and then you're going to pass.
And then you're going to you're going to pass away.
You're going to die. Yeah, this is the last thing you're going to do, and you're going to die. And that's why it was a little bit difficult for the Jewish people. It was a little bit difficult for Moshe to muster the army. If we wait 5 years. So, maybe 10 years. We'll figure it out. And Moshe's like, what do you mean? It's a mitzvah. Hashem said, muster an army, take revenge, move forward. So he had to pressure them into creating the army and into going ahead and fighting this war. He did it enthusiastically, and the Jews did it very reluctantly, because they knew that this was essentially. Is
it stated in the Mikra? Is it stated in the Mikra that Hashem says, like, you're gonna do this and then you're no more?
The verse explicitly says, take revenge against the Midianites on behalf of the Jewish people, and then you will pass. Then you will be gathered to your people. And then the verse says, the Jewish people handed over 1,000 people to the army.
Yeah, that doesn't sound like they were thrilled.
No. In no other place are the Jews reluctant to join the fighting army, go to war. But here the reason why they're reluctant is because they know that this is one more thing, or maybe the last thing, before Moshe passes away. And in fact, that's what happens. We have this Torah portion, you have next Torah portion, and then we're in the very short slide into the passing of Moshe.
Next portion is Dvarim.
After next week is Maseh. And then it's Dvarim.
All right. Well, is that Matot? Matot.
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 You've wrapped.
Well, thank you guys for tuning in and joining us, and we'll see you next week.
Like, subscribe. What is the thing? Like, subscribe, share, eat, drink, and be merry.
I like all of those. Have a great week.
Have a spectacular week.
There we go.